Good morning, everybody. I am Brigadier General Mariusz Fritz, Vice Rector here in National Defense University, and welcome all of you here for the second meeting with the Professor Azar Gat. This professor is always a pleasure for us, and I believe also for the academic society to have such distinguished scientist in our academia. So warmly welcome again, sir. Here and to the public, I will want to announce that this is the second lecture. The last Monday we had the first lecture dedicated on the topic. The professor was speaking on war, on the phenomena of war. So this is the topic what we are really interested in as lecturers, professors. So, sir, thank you very much for coming for today's lecture. This topic, as you see on the presentation, is technological revolution in war. Very interesting topic when we are hearing how the information technology is currently developing and how information technology is changing society and approach to the society. So before we start the lecture, I want to say some words about the professor biography. So to all of you, just to let you know, Professor Azar Gat is an Israeli political scientist and military historian, specializing in the history of war, military strategy, and the evolutionary and cultural foundation of armed conflict. He is a professor at the Institute for National Security Studies and Department of Political Science at Tel Aviv University. Professor Gat is the author or editor of approximately 12 books, if I am right, including major works such as War in Human Civilization, Nation, The Long History and Deep Roots of the Political Ethnicity and Naturalization, The Origins of Military Thought, The Political History of Violence and the Nature of War. His research combines historical, political, and evolutionary approaches, analyzing both historical conflicts and their roots in human nature. His work covers topics such as military history, war theory and strategy, national security, ethnicity and political violence, and the evolutionary basis of warfare. Professor Gat is widely recognized for his interdisciplinary approach, integrating history, political science, sociology, and evolutionary theory. Although his primary affiliation is the Tel Aviv University, Professor Gat has delivered numerous guest lectures and seminars worldwide, including Oxford, Yale, Stanford, Georgetown, Ohio State, Freiburg, Munich, and Constance. His research and publication are internationally recognized and have made a significant contribution to the study of war, strategy, and security. So today's lecture is, as you see, a technological revolution in war from the 19th century to Ukraine and the Middle East. So again, welcome, sir, and please join me to welcome the Professor Gat. So, thank you very much.
So again, it's a pleasure being here, and thank you for having me. So as said, I'm going to discuss technological revolutions in war since the beginning of the industrial age, that is, since the beginning of the 19th century, briefly as a survey, and then move to the current revolution. I'll mainly concentrate on Israel's current war and the developments that are taking place there. 2 points before the beginning. I am not an engineer, so my comments are more on the general framework of the technologies rather than on the physics of the equipment itself. And second, I have no access to classified information. And even if I had, I was not in liberty to share it with you. So I'm going to talk only about things that we all can read about, that have been made public. I'm talking with respect to the current war in the Middle East around Israel. All right. So since the outbreak of the current war in the Middle East, many in Israel have criticized the declining importance and neglect of the Israeli ground forces over recent decades. They have emphasized the division of the Israeli armed forces into an elite high-tech army, relying on the Air Force, precision-guided munition, and special forces, on the one hand, and on the other, the ground formations, the brigades and divisions which make up the bulk of the Israeli army. There are the majority of which reservists, which have been left behind. That was the common criticism just before the war and at the beginning of the war. However, the current war shows that the ground formations have become a central part of the high-tech army. Indeed, this process was already visible before the war and is rooted far beyond Israel in broad global technological trend shaping warfare and military organization in the current era. There are several reasons for the low point that the Israeli ground forces reached before the war in Gaza. They included the perception that the era of Israel's large-scale wars had ended as the Arab states steadily withdrew from the conflict, the centrality of the campaign between the wars, which replaced large wars as the core of Israel's security doctrine, relying on air power and special forces, the unprecedented precision capabilities of modern weaponry, and the fears of significant casualties involved in deploying ground formations. The glaring lack of success in the ground operation during Israel's Second Lebanon War in 2006 reinforced this trend. As a result, the Israeli ground forces were barely employed after the Second Lebanon War, that is again 2006, and when they were used, such as in the occasional limited operation in Gaza over the years before the current war, their operational role was very limited. The Army's ground formation, which in past wars defeated enemies through advances of dozens or hundreds of kilometers, pushed forward only a few kilometers deep into Gaza in this operation, achieving negligible results. As a result, the Israeli ground forces steadily lost combat experience and underwent a moral decline, a decline of morale. Among them, a widespread sentiment spread that we have become the cavalry army, a reference to the Polish cavalry supposedly charging anachronistically against the German armored division at the outbreak of World War II in 1939. I am referring to a title of a book published in Israel that made its distinction between the high-tech military part of the military and what he called the cavalry army, that is the bulk of the Israeli ground forces. Still, it is clear that the cavalry army, if we return to this historical image, is not expected to fulfill its mission by charging headlong at the German armored division, the spearhead of that era's technological military revolution. The cavalry arm of old rightly vacated the stage, and their formation in all armies were being converted into mechanized warfare, both before and after 1939. Indeed, a similar transformation to the current technological revolution is what has happened to the Israeli ground formation before, during, and after the war in Gaza. So let us begin with the phenomenon of technological revolution in warfare in general. Far-reaching revolutions in warfare have occurred in sequence since the dawn of the industrial technological age each directly tied to broader revolution in civilian technology. The first industrial revolution during the 19th century was powered by the steam engine and major advances in metallurgy and machine-based manufacturing. Thus, railway increased the strategic mobility and logistical capability of armies tenfold and more. At sea, while the shift from sail to steam only doubled or tripled maritime mobility, the size of iron and steel battleships also grew tenfold and more. So we have, this is the earliest steamboat, and this is the Battle of Tsushima, wonderful Japanese painting. Added to this was a revolution in information communication, as electrical telegraph lines connected armies across entire countries and linked naval bases across oceans and continents in real time. Meanwhile, advances in metallurgy and machine manufacturing transformed firearms and tactics. Rifled barrel, breech-loading mechanisms, magazine rifles, rapid-firing artillery and machine guns sharply increased range, accuracy, and rate of fire, each by about tenfold. All this within 60 years. Naval and artillery underwent a similar transformation, and by the 1870s, torpedoes had been added to the arsenal. Thus, following the first industrial revolution, armies could travel by rail and be commanded via telegraph en route to the battlefield. Yet, once at the front, they reverted to transportation and communication methods of Napoleon's era, if not Alexander's. Battlefield mobility remained limited to human muscles, with artillery and supplies drawn by horses. Indeed, hundreds of thousands of horses were still deployed by each great power army during World War I, and in some cases, including Germany, during World War II. Command and control in the field, if telegraph lines had not been laid in advance, likewise depended on foot or horseback messengers. Moreover, while firepower had rocketed, soldiers, even when dispersed and taking cover, had nothing better than their skin to protect them from the storm of steel on the open battlefield. This imbalance led to the murderous tactical and operational stalemate on the Western Front in World War I. Even the meager gains achieved at terrible costs were often nullified when infantry forces, struggling to expand their tactical foothold amid a maze of trenches, barbed wire, and enemy fire, were driven back by enemy reinforcement, rushed up to the front by rail. However, from the late 19th century, the second industrial revolution began making its mark on civilian life and, as before, profoundly influenced the military realm. Chemical, electricity, and the internal combustion engine were at the heart of this revolutionary wave. The chemical industry contributed both new explosives and soon chemical warfare. Advances in electricity brought a wide range of military application, but it was the internal combustion engine that most decisively transformed warfare. On land, it enabled armies' mobility beyond the railway grid. Automobiles and then tractors developed between 1895 and 1905 increased mobility on the battlefield many times over. World War I saw the introduction of the tank, essentially an armored and armed tractor, which brought mechanized mobility and armored protection to the battlefield, helping thereby to correct the severe imbalance created by steam and the surge in firepower. Radio, by expanding real-time communication beyond fixed telegraph lines, enabled the emergence of mechanized army on tracks and wheels during World War II. Simultaneously, the internal combustion engine also made powered flight possible, beginning in 1903. Massive air forces emerged quickly during World War I and evolved to play a leading role in World War II. Warships, already steam-powered and clad in iron and steel armor, were less drastically affected by the internal combustion engine. But naval warfare as a whole underwent a revolution. Dual propulsion systems, combining internal combustion and electric motors, enabled the development of the first practical submarine around 1900. Additionally, the airplane brought about the end of the heavy gun, armored warship. So, we are familiar with air forces and submarine and the aircraft at sea. Together, the submarine and the airplane came to dominate naval warfare by World War II. The third industrial technological revolution, or the information revolution, was driven mainly by breakthroughs in electronics and computing, which once again transformed both civilian life and the nature of warfare from about the middle of the 20th century. Radar, already present in World War II, followed by developments in electro-optics, television, laser, and satellite-guided missile weapon system, revolutionized the realm of airland, air defense, and naval warfare from the 1950s and 1960s onward. Rapidly improving sensors of all kinds, combined with electronic computing power that doubled roughly every 18 months, made the detection, targeting, and destruction of most hardware targets nearly guaranteed, regardless of range. In the air and at sea, the only true effective defense lay in the same technological sphere itself, that is, electronic jamming counter systems. Electronic guidance system found an ideal match with rocket missile armament. As a result, both gun-based munition and heavy armor, which no longer provided meaningful protection, were marginalized or entirely displaced in aerial and naval warfare. So we see the heavy gun gone and the introduction of missile, electronic warfare, air defenses, air warfare, naval warfare. Due to the complex terrain and vastly greater number of targets, the electronic revolution impact on land warfare lagged by several decades behind its effect in air and naval combat. It began to show in anti-tank warfare from the 1970s onward, follow mainly in the air-land domain, what we are seeing here. The Gulf Wars and the Kosovo conflict signaled the intensified arrival of the new age. Since then, the electronic revolution has continued advancing and entered a new phase, which some define as the fourth technological revolution across civilian life, and as before, also within the military sphere. Combat systems today are increasingly integrated into electronic networks of computing, internet communication or cyber, big data, artificial intelligence, and automation robotics. The impact of all this on land warfare, which until recently was the least affected by the general electronic revolution, is now the most far-reaching. All right. So we now move to discuss today's revolution and Israel's current war. The Gulf War exposed the utter helplessness of the Iraqi army, one of the largest in the world, with dozens of divisions and thousands of tanks against the new age American high-tech military. Just 4 or 5 American divisions supported by massive air power sufficed to conquer Iraq in the Second Gulf War in a one-sided display. Iraq's previous generation mechanized army was utterly unable to mount meaningful resistance. In response, technologically inferior militaries facing developed countries' new capabilities began adapting by adopting disappearance tactics, minimizing their signature to census. We saw this in my region in the world, in the Syrian army adaptation to Israeli superiority during the 1990s. We saw it against the Americans in Kosovo. We saw it with Hezbollah, and above all with Hamas in Gaza, nestling itself in built-up urban spaces and vast underground system, 500 to 600 kilometers long. At the same time, the non-state enemies of Israel on Israel's border also acquired their own cutting-edge capabilities, increasingly available through supporting states and on the open market. Hezbollah advanced anti-tank capabilities, including the Russian-made Kornet missiles, already showed itself in the Lebanon War of 2006. Yet more advanced anti-tank missiles, cruise missiles, and drones were used by Hezbollah on a broad scale in the current war. Hamas, too, employed drones very effectively in its surprise attack on October 7th, 2023, most notably by destroying Israel's intelligence and communication systems along the borders. For their part, Israel's armed forces underwent much adaptation to the third and fourth technological military revolutions before the war. Israel air and naval electronic missiles and anti-missile systems rank among the most advanced in the world. Israel is a global pioneer in developing multi-layered anti-missile interception systems like the Iron Dome, David Sling, and the Arrow missiles, shooting down about 25% of the rockets launched against Israel by Hamas and Hezbollah, and 85% of the long-range ballistic missiles launched by Iran. Even earlier, Israel was the world pioneer in creating UAVs in the 1970s, followed by armed or attack UAVs in the 1990s, directly impacting the ground battlefield. Israel also developed highly advanced fire-and-forget anti-tank missiles and loitering munitions. The electronically guided active interception protection system for armored vehicles, Trophy and Iron Fist, represented the global breakthrough already acquired by the US, German, British, and other militaries, and they mark the most significant step in bringing Israel ground forces into the new age. I'll talk about it in a minute. In the current war, the Trophy system successfully neutralized Hezbollah's most advanced anti-tank missiles, and its protecting envelope is now being extended upward against drone and loitering munitions. Even before October 7, light tactical drones were introduced into IDF battalions. AI system integrated with advanced sensors for target detection and precision strike were already in use by Israeli intelligence and Air Force, and were poised for integration into the ground forces soon after. Robotic land systems were also in the early stages of development and integration. War are major accelerators of military development, driven partly by the empirical experience accumulated and the new needs and challenges they expose. The wars in Ukraine and soon after in Israel demonstrate this once again. The dominant role played by drones and loitering munition in intelligence, fire direction, and kamikaze strikes came as a surprise, even if it had been partly anticipated and demonstrated in the wholesale destruction of the helpless Armenian army in the 2020 war against Azerbaijan. The Israeli army preparedness for the new battlefield has revealed some significant gaps. Israel remains a world leader in several areas with a system that proved themselves impressively in the war. However, its preparedness against other emerging battlefield threats was insufficient. Above all, defense against drones and cruise missiles and the tunnels challenge. Additionally, the Army's own equipment with simpler systems, especially light tactical attack drones, was lacking. After Hamas attack on October 7th, a mistaken consensus spread among Israeli commentators that the army had become too small and had relied too heavily on technology. However, as I have argued, the opposite is true. The Israeli army has a similar number of first-line divisions, 6 to 7, as it did during the Yom Kippur War, when it faced a coalition of Arab states, some 18 regular enemy divisions, and roughly 4,500 tanks. Israel mobilized manpower for the current war, about 350,000 personnel, is several times larger than Hezbollah and Hamas combined. Of course, various adjustments to Israeli ground forces are required, filling the rank and significantly expanding local militia territorial defense in border communities to guard against terrorist surprise attacks like that of October 7. But the main challenge described above demand, above all, the development of more advanced technologies, precision-guided munitions, active defense system against drones and missiles, including solid-state laser interception system, one of the most seminal developments which will surely be deployed in the coming years. Connectivity, real-time intelligence, artificial intelligence, automation, and robotics, all based on electronic computerized system and counter system and their integration into the ground force formation on the battlefield. Tanks have reaffirmed their value in Israel's current war, but their role on the battlefield is changing and their configuration may follow suit. The tank is a product of the second mechanization revolution and has been the backbone of land warfare for about 100 years. Since World War II, tanks have been optimized primarily to fight other tanks and second to withstand hollow charges. Their main armament is a high-velocity gun firing kinetic projectiles. Half of their 60 to 70-ton weight in most armies consists of heavy armor, which in turn requires a 1,500 horsepower engine. However, tanks will no longer come within kinetic fire range of each other and will be discovered and attacked at much longer ranges. Gone are the days when heavily armored formations engage each other in direct combat with cannon fire at the center of ground warfare. This is no different than the mighty battleships of World War II in the Pacific theater that never came within firing range of each other. The gun munition, we don't need it. The tank's heavy armor has similarly reached the limits of its ability to withstand precision, tandem hollow charge, fire and forget munitions, which target the tank's top. The destruction of the Armenian army in the 2020 war, like the stranded and harassed Russian convoy en route to Kiev, and the image of the Russian armored battalion massacred during its attempted river crossing in the Donbass with the shattered bridge in the middle, starkly demonstrate the new reality. Trophy, active defense on an Israeli Merkava, also intercepting electronically guided active defense. This does not mean that the tank and other fighting vehicles are history. But in my view, the answer is not to be found in further reinforcing of the heavy armor or in improved tactical practices, clumsy as Russian tactics proves to be. Rather, the answer lies in a full-scale adjustment of land fighting vehicles to the ongoing electronic revolution, above all in adopting active defense systems like the Trophy or Iron Fist. Active defense means electronic detection, disruption, and interception of incoming projectiles launched from land or from the air, the same revolution that the sea and air warfare have already undergone. As I suggested, even before Israel's current war, this may mean a reduction of the tank's armor to a minimum necessary to withstand light arms, bullets, shrapnel, and blasts, with a corresponding decrease in the tank's weight to perhaps half its current weight. A light 30mm gun combined with missile armament may be more suitable armament for the tank. I suspect that this means that despite their great sophistication, new heavy models such as the German Panther or Russian Armata tanks, despite their great sophistication, are a step in the wrong direction. The Israeli experimental future Carmel tank may be the way of the future. An active protection system will become standard everywhere, and this is only a matter of time. We already hear of a Russian development, Arena M, and there is a Korean development. Others will follow suit. They will transform land warfare. In Ukraine, much of the frontline World War I-like stalemate emphasized by observers has resulted from the fact that the armored vehicles of both sides, including the advanced Western Leopard 2 tanks supplied to Ukraine, have not been equipped with active electronically guided interception protection systems like the Trophy. Such system alone can restore battlefield mobility in the face of the new threats. The current reality in which being detected on the modern battlefield means almost assured destruction will no longer hold. A two-sided game reopens. Battlefield survival and success will depend on the question of which side possesses the last word in terms of offensive and defensive electronic system and counter system for detection, attack, protection, and disruption. As in air and sea warfare during the electronic age, it can be expected that when one side holds a decisive advantage in this system, we would see crushing, almost one-sided victories on land. This is akin to what we saw in the 12-day war between Israel and Iran in June 2025, this year. Owing to its total superiority in electronic combat system, the Israeli Air Force, manned aircraft and long-range UAVs working in cooperation were able to dominate the sky over Iran some 2,000 kilometers away. To pave the way for its bombing of the Iranian nuclear facilities, the Israeli Air Force destroyed the Iranian radars and air defense system, as well as eliminating 2/3 of Iran's ballistic surface-to-surface missile launchers. May I also add that the cruise missiles, Iran launched about 1,000 cruise missiles against Israel, in addition to the ballistic missile. From this 1,000 cruise missile launch, all of them, except for one, were intercepted, either by fire or by electronic means. So 99.9% of the cruise missiles launched by Iran did not reach their destination. No such dominance of the air was achieved, for example, by the Russians in Ukraine. Note, I mentioned this last time, note that since the mid-1980s, with one exception in 2019, the Israeli Air Force has lost no manned aircraft in combat activity. And as I mentioned, this cannot be attributed to a lack of operational activity on its part. Again, no Israeli aircraft was shot down over Iran for these during this 12-day war, despite its massive presence over Iran and despite the density of the air defense system there. The same type of struggle over electronic, robotic, cyber superiority is expected in land warfare, with potential massive advantage to the side holding the edge. In this respect, what we are seeing in Ukraine is only the beginning. We are going to see a rapid development of the trends that have seminally showed themselves during the war in Ukraine. Thus, old-style ground forces of the mechanization era are in the process of being transforming into a high-tech army, much like the transformation the air and naval forces underwent earlier. A broad perspective, one that draws on an understanding of the nature of the technological revolution over the past 200 years and their far-reaching impact on shaping armies and the face of the battlefield, can help us grasp the nature of this transformation. But above all, it is critical to identify and apply the characteristics of our own era's technological revolution. Thank you very much. I apologize for the presentation. I prepared an updated one which included much more on the war, in the current war around Israel, but got mixed up. Sorry.
Thank you, Professor. Before I would give a microphone to the audience, I would like to start with a more general question. Because from what you said, there are two camps in science, our science now, security sciences. Either history is not important now because we have so huge technological development that it doesn't count what happened before, because we are building our own new future. The second camp is that these 3 or 4 even industrial revolutions that we had for the last 200 years, they tell us that we are living in cycles. So each cycle brings new developments and change, and we as a human beings are able to digest those revolutions. So if we look at the past, we could see patterns that would help us to deal what is happening now. So is there still a need to teach military history or strategic history to our officers, or rather we should teach them about technological development as it happens now?
All right, thank you. So I'll draw on my lecture first and then refer to some classical military thinkers. As I tried to show, there is a pattern of military revolutions, and we might broaden our horizon by understanding how previous military revolutions have affected the military. And since the beginning of the industrial age, we have had 3 to 4 such revolutions. And it's worthwhile keeping them in mind and understanding their broad outline. And at the same time, it's even not more important. It's at least as important to understand the characteristics of the current revolution. And now let's go back to classical military thought. So during, you're familiar, I think, with the concept of the principles of war, which is supposedly trans-historical, and they have some value, you know, surprise, mass, concentration of force, and so forth. And they have some value. And then they were first suggested in the 18th century by the military thinkers of the Enlightenment. And then came Clausewitz at the beginning of the 19th century. He expressed the romantic reaction against the thinkers of the Enlightenment. and the rise of historicism, that is the view that each particular period should be understood in its own terms. And he rejected the concept of principles of war, and instead emphasized the study of, you don't have to study things across history superficially, as he argued, but rather you should pick specific cases and study them in depth. The main function of, the main utility of such study is that you, as it were, the historical situation or the historical case which you choose comes to life in your mind, in your imagination. It's an indirect way of training you by taking you into the circumstances of a particular case to understand from within what decisions were made and what you would have, what decision you would have made had you lived in that. So it's the training of judgment that he thought was most useful. For this, you had to pick your historical cases, not a too broad spectrum, but concentrate on a few important cases. And here we come to your question. He said, it's always good to know, the military history, but it's most useful to concentrate on cases that are recent enough to still be relevant. So in the early 19th century, he wrote that cases before the Austrian War of Succession, that is before 1740, were too different from our situation. So I Clausewitz, suggest that we focus on historical cases after 1740. That is the later part of the 18th century and the beginning of the 19th century, Napoleonic era, which are close enough to our situation to be of practical value. That's Clausewitz. So if we translate Clausewitz into the present, it's good to have the broader perspective, but supposedly case studies to be delved into would be the war starting, say, from the first Gulf War, when conditions from then on are most similar to those that we are facing today. So he would think that it's important. Obviously, he was well versed in military history in general. He would think that knowing about World War II is important. But if you have limited time and you are here in a course in a military university, so better focus on cases from, say, the first Gulf War, because it is the first time that the electronic battlefield is present, it's in all its potency, and since then we have only seen how it has evolved. So that's Clausewitz's position, and on this point I agree with him.
So this is first general question. The second one, we now have a situation in the Middle East, and that Iran is out of reach, really, to fight with Israel at this moment. But does this change with any technological revolutions that we will see? So more UAVs, more artificial intelligence, more missiles? Does this country has potential to fight Israel in the future on technological field?
So Iran has demonstrated its vulnerability. It's very adept. It has a good technology, not the best, but good enough. But the main threat from Iran, as we all know, is the nuclear one. So the real question is whether or not Iran decides to opt for the bomb. And this is the decision that Iran will have to take. As far as we all know, it hasn't taken this decision yet. It's still considering the situation after the very heavy blow that it received only a few months ago. If Iran opts for nuclear weapons, then it's not a new game, but still this is the threat that mainly concerns Israel and the United States. So we'll have to wait and see what Iran decides with respect to nuclear weapons. Other parts of its military, obviously, Iran will make great effort to reconstruct its military, but the real threat is nuclear.
And the last question of mine, and then I will return the microphone to the audience. What are the trends that will make land forces to be like navies or air force, which are visible today and which are not visible today? Because to be honest, we still think about tanks in these terms of 60, 70, 80 tons. Armored fighting vehicles for the infantry, another 50, 55, 60 tons. We still see artillery, at least in Poland we buy them a lot. So are those trends already visible, or they will come to us quite rapidly?
So they are already visible. As I said, in previous technological revolutions, we also see the trend unfolding over decades. All right, and we saw. So, for example, how do you best integrate tanks and armored warfare in modern warfare? I'm going back to the interwar period, the period between World War I and World War II, and there were various programs, and we know in retrospect that the German concentration of their armor in armored division and the doctrine of deep penetration proved superior. There were other programs, the French, the British, obviously the Soviet, and so forth. So what we do, everybody now recognizes the revolution. That is, we are living in electronics, cyber, the AI, and all that in this era, and that this is going to affect war. Nobody doubts this. How to apply the revolution is something different. So, for example, in civilian life, we are all acutely aware and have been aware for decades that we live in a high-tech era, but only the Microsofts and the Apples and the like were very successful. Others were less so. So how to choose the right options within a revolution that we are all acutely aware that we are living through is the big question. So as I suggested, I think that the very sophisticated tanks produced now by Germany, by Russia, probably others, are not a step in the right direction. What we need is armored vehicles are able to protect themselves actively, electronically. There is a limit to what the heavy armor can withstand, and the high velocity gun of the tank will not be useful against other tanks because the range are going to be very different. Other things we know, including, by the way, laser. This is going to be a major thing in intercepting loitering munitions, everything that flies, including probably artillery projectiles within a few years. So laser defense intercepting system is one of the things that we do not see yet, but we are going to see.
Okay, so we don't know till we be there. We know that something will happen. We know that this is like new technologies. We know broadly how it will happen, but still the right scenario for each armed forces is with we can't be sure that we hit right combination.
Of course we cannot be sure. The future is uncertain and a lot of uncertainty that are involved, and we know from earlier revolutions that there have been many less than optimal choice made. For example, all the great naval powers before World War II produced massive battleships, which in the Pacific Ocean, for example, which was the main theater of naval warfare, never reached within firing range of each other because of the aircraft. The aircraft carrier proved to be the future from 1941 on.
So it's more risky to be on the spearhead of technological development and choose one option than to have a broad front and decide which works and which not.
I'm not sure that there is such a blueprint. You have to make hard decisions, and for this you need foresight and the best understanding that you can master of the realities of the battlefield.
Who should do it?
Each military for its own, and and together.
Militaries or the state?
Militaries.
I mean,
within states.
The broad knowledge, which is quadrupling every year, makes it's almost impossible to follow on with everything what happens in sciences and in the world. So I think military should have support from the state in this kind of gathering information what is happening around.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Any questions from the audience?
Thank you very much, Professor, for this interesting lecture. I am from the Air Force, so my question will be, let's say, dedicated to the air operation. So I would like to hear from you your assessment, let's say, about the last Israeli operation against Iran. Can you tell us more about, let's say, execution of this operation, coordination, and the tactics? How you assess this operation? Can we call this operation that it was the first, let's say, the third level revolution operation? This is the one question, and the second question I have about the Israeli army. To your mind, the Israeli army, can we call it now that is the third revolution type army? Or they have, let's say, still something to do to improve their capability, execution, all this kind of issue. And also what's the criteria, maybe, what's the criteria to call that those army can we call that it's purely, let's say, third revolution army? Thank you very much.
So with respect to Iran, I can only say what I know, and what I know is basically what everybody knows, because as I said, I'm not privy to the classified material. So we know that Israeli UAVs were over Iran throughout the time, and gave Israel real-time intelligence about everything. They were particularly useful, so they can hover there for I think 36 hours. All right, these are the big UAVs. This is not the kind of thing that you see in Ukraine, for example. So we hear a lot about the cheap drones that you know, but all, as I said, all the cheap state-of-the-art drone no, missiles shot from, launched from Iran, not the ballistic missiles, the cruise missiles. All of them were shot down. So they were good, But they proved to be, not to be a match for the Israeli disruption and interception system. So they shot 1,000, only one got to Israel. So first of all, UAVs hovering over Iran, providing real-time information, also carrying out about half of the bombing. So they were particularly effective against the ballistic missile launches. They were able to identify them before they launched the missiles and target them with missiles and destroy them on the ground. So from about 400 missile launches, about 300 were destroyed, mainly by UAVs. And simultaneously, there were the airstrikes, 1,500 to 2,000 kilometers away from Israel. Each time, sometimes about 80 aircraft in one go. And what they did is first, with a long-range missile, destroy the Iranian air defenses, thereby paving the way to Tehran and beyond. And then they, in a way, acquired a kind of immunity which enabled them to bomb the nuclear installations, the missile factories, and everything connected with this. And as we know, the stealth fighters paved the way, and followed by F-15s and F-16s. And this is more or less. And there were, as you know, commando units on the ground that also targeted real-time intelligence, allowed decapitation of the entire Iranian military, of the top 20 people in the nuclear establishment, and so forth. The second question. So the Israeli ground forces are in the process of being converted. So as I said, trophy systems are essential. Every armored fighting vehicle should have this active defense system, which nullifies most of the anti-tank missiles. I think that this project makes much more sense than, say, a Merkava 5. All right. And as I said, drones are being integrated in large number. AI for detecting threats and targets are being integrated very quickly now. So this is the process. The Israeli ground forces are large enough. What they need is more and more investment in technology. And of course, there is the tunnel program. This is the only arena. Gaza is such a problem. Look, with Iran, the war ended in 12 days, more or less. Hezbollah was destroyed in a few weeks. The problem with Gaza, and the reason why the war there goes on for 2 years, is the 500 to 600 kilometers of tunnels, which make it impossible to know where exactly in this huge underground space Hezbollah fighters, Hezbollah installations, Hezbollah missile sites are located. So this is the reason why it takes so long, and this is the reason why no decisive result has been reached, and this is the reason why so many troops are needed against Hezbollah. The Air Force with intelligence did 90% of the work on Israel's northern border. They cannot do the same in Gaza, because we don't know where in this vast metro, as they call it, Hamas is located. If Israel withdraws from Gaza, Hamas will return in a minute, using this underground system to hide, to conceal itself. This is the problem. So part of the answer might be technology, better sensors, our robots are working in the tunnels, and so forth. So again, more technology.
Professor. I think that war effort is based on two legs. One is technology, and one is mental dimension. Because all this...
You're right.
And all Israeli-Arab wars and others approve this, because you may have technology, but without fresh idea, without strategy, without morale, motivation, its technology will not work. The chess game is a proof that finally is a struggle of brains, yeah. And going to technology, and when we will have no human on board of these tanks, many problems will disappear. And why we are not, probably we are very, very close that we will have robots, unmanned robots, not without any human on board. And then it's not necessary so many systems. The robot may be more simple, and human may be behind of robots, of army of robots, and so on and so on. We are going probably in this direction. What do you think about this?
I think robotics is on the way in, obviously. It's going to be integrated in the foreseeable future with the human element. As you said, there are two kinds of robots. One is remote control. So, for example, a tank can go in. We have this already with bulldozers in Gaza, so they are employed from a distance by a driver. The same with UAVs. That's one kind of robot. The other kind, the more robotic, is autonomous systems that can work and reach decisions by themselves. And we are going to probably see a mix of these over the coming decades. By the way, I might mention that the military theorist J.F.C. Fuller, the pioneer of armored warfare between the two world wars, in 1928 he said already that the next revolution, he already looked towards the future. He said that the next revolution, the third revolution, because he was very aware of the effect of technology. He said that the third revolution is going to be electric and robotic. Now, the word electronic did not exist in 1928. So when he said electric and robotic, he really got it. And this is, in 1928. So, yeah, we are now seeing this transformation.
I would like to ask about the how do you think? I mean, first, a little bit words to my question is like when you look about the technological development among the last century, and the Clausewitz concept of wars. And the Western approach to the wars, that the technology is well suited, well applied when we got the interstate, the wars between the states. Yes, but when we, but when the super power like the United States, with so high developed technology, had to fight wars against the revolutionary wars, yes, like in Vietnam, in the Iraq, in Afghanistan, which was the last war. These technological inventions weren't suited relevant to the result or the outcome of this conflict. So my first question is, can you say your opinion about the next level, the next electronic things, the computer, the quantum technologies will be able to break this pattern, I think.
So I just would like to remind you that Clausewitz himself saw how guerrilla warfare in Spain, behind Napoleon lines, not behind, pursuing Napoleon after his painful retreat from Moscow. He saw what a major role guerrilla warfare played in the downfall of Napoleon. By the way, this was the trigger of his change of mind from 1927 onward. I won't bore you with all this, but he was very conscious of these developments then. Now, with respect to the challenge of guerrilla warfare, I'll say two things. One of them, it's mostly the problem of democratic countries, because of the self-limitations that they take upon themselves. All the guerrilla, not all, almost all the guerrilla warfare that you see were waged successfully against liberal powers. People cite Afghanistan, right? But they forget that Afghanistan was the exception in the Soviet system. The Soviet system, I don't need to tell you, ruled over dozens of nationalities, both within the Soviet Union and outside the Soviet Union, such as here, and did not have a problem with guerrilla warfare. It did what was necessary. So the problem was, and the same, the Uyghurs or the Tibetans in China are, China can control them. It would not allow them to develop into guerrilla warfare because of its ruthless regime. So the problem is that of democracies. There is no easy answer, but the general answer, if you cannot avoid it, is that the adjustment of this high-tech warfare originally developed against regular armies. Originally it was developed to stop the Soviet armored division pouring into Western Europe, adjusting them for use against guerrillas. So we saw, for example, in Lebanon, within a few weeks, as I said, by a combination of intelligence and Air Force, devastating results were achieved against basically a guerrilla army. The Americans were quite successful against ISIS in Syria and Iraq. So part of the answer, it's not the whole answer, part of the answer is in adjusting in terms of sensors, in terms of precise munitions and all that. Intelligence gathering, crucial here.
Hello, Professor Tomasz Kowalczyk here. I'm from the outside of the military ecosystem, as you probably can see. I come from the innovation ecosystem. Thank you for your lecture. I believe there is one elephant in the room, because I fully agree with the future of sensors and advanced warfare and so on, but developing a sensor or developing a tank even is quite easy from the technological standpoint. But when it comes to usage of data, AI and so on, you need to rely on chipsets and semiconductors, and there are only a limited number of economies providing these elements of infrastructure. How do you think the new revolution will be dependent on the value chains, global value chains, so that this is something that we can see right now in the conflict between America and China when it comes to access to new technologies? So how will it end for countries like both Israel and Poland, so that we are not independent when it comes to access to these pieces of infrastructure? So
absolutely, and this is what we see in today's world as the threat from China grows, is a decoupling of the industries, especially in this field. So we know that Trump, for example, changes the free trade the regime that prevailed, and in my view is wrong about this. But in terms of these technologies that are crucial for defense, he's obviously right. He's not the first. It all began with President Biden, right? Once the prospect of war hangs over China, or the prospect of a conflict between the United States and China in the Pacific grows, obviously the United States has to make sure that it has all the components of like chips and other things which are crucial, and it needs to make sure that China does not get what the United States and the West has to offer in this respect. And this is the process that we have been seeing again since the former American administration and today. So it was Adam Smith, the champion and theorist of free trade, who said that opulence is more, that defense is more important than opulence. That I'm for free trade unless it touches on defense. So the decoupling of the economies in terms of defense is, under the circumstances, essential. And we are at the beginning of this process. Now, with respect to Poland and Israel, obviously we depend to a larger degree on our allies. So the idea is that the West still, in very meaningful ways, cooperate in terms of defense, despite everything that we see. And that, that we have access, sufficient access to technology, not all of them. Right? Yeah.
Sir, another question then. How would you advise Poland to invest these great spendings on defense when on one hand we want to be technological, we want to have the high-tech equipment, but on the other hand we are on the very front line and we face the risk of brutal force, which en masse is still quite effective?
Yeah, so I cannot advise the Polish military on the Polish. Not because I don't have the knowledge of everything that is needed for such an advice. But I'll just say in principle that there is no such distinction or sharp distinction between sophisticated technology and destroying masses of, say, tanks. You remember that I just showed it. The Iraqi army was one of the largest in the world, with 5,000 tanks. all right, with close to 30 divisions. It was all destroyed from afar by standoff missiles and weapon systems. So obviously you have to strike a balance. You cannot do things without ground formations. But these ground formations need to be state-of-the-art in terms of the intelligence and strike capability that they have, which all involve high-tech. So if the question is having two tanks without active defense or having one with active defense, my answer is have one with active defense. But this is very crudely put. Right. Yeah.
Okay, this is my turn. I'm also from outside of the military. Thank you, Professor, for outlining these developments. Assuming they are universal, what is not universal is how countries react. How do they embrace these revolutions? I wonder if you could present your overview of how different countries, due to many different reasons, are embracing this revolution. Some, of course, may be just lagging behind, some are catching up quite quickly, but some may be intentionally hedging. I guess Ukraine is one of those examples who are intentionally hedging into some interesting areas. I wonder what is your view? Thank you.
With Ukraine, what do you mean by hedging?
They are, in some ways, they're catching up very quickly, but in some other areas, they just are unable and looking into some, different areas.
So with Ukraine, it's as you said, they can only do what they can do. All right. So they depend on imports for many things, for the economy and the military and everything. But we see what kind of production lines for drones, cheap drones that they've been building. That's a massive adaptation and very cost effective. For the rest, whatever they can get, they'll get. Now, with respect to the global picture here, I can only draw a very general outline. I think that both China and the United States have been doing their best to be at the cutting edge of this technology. We see it with China, very impressive, at least on paper, at least what we can see. With the United States, there is no question that the war in Ukraine was a wake-up call. So they are trying to adapt in terms of concepts, and then in terms of procurement and equipment and battle formations and everything. With Europe, I don't need to tell you that you start from I mean Europeans, start from a very low starting point and breathlessly trying to catch up since infrastructure is so depleted. You need to create the infrastructure and mobilize public support, which may be a little easier in Germany, in Poland than in Spain or Portugal. So you are familiar with the contours of the problem. Iran, for example, has been doing quite an impressive job. Remember that the cruise missiles used by the UAVs, used by Russia, it needed to import them from Iran, which sounds like like a fantasy. So it has quite an effective industrial technological infrastructure for weapon system. Very little else, as we know. But which proved inadequate when encountering a far more superior technology. Right.
I have probably last question. I have a question concerning costs and structure. Cost, this new technology costs a lot. So it will replace systems that were costly, and it will cost even more because of those costs. The structure of the military force probably would tend to be smaller and smaller because they will have those very expensive systems, and there will be less and less of them. Look at the Air Force or on this kind of stuff. It means that, for example, when it comes to Israel, do you need still conscription and reserve force? Because if you are a high-tech army, then you are a high-tech army.
So there are several levels to this question. First of all, it's not clear that all these systems are more expensive. So, for example, we all know just discussed the role of drones in the Ukrainian war. All right, so the Ukraine now produces hundreds of thousands of them, very cheaply, and their use is very effective. So it's not as clear that the new systems are bound to be more expensive. And if we look again at the picture during the 19th and 20th century, you'll see that military budgets throughout the period are pretty constant, about 5% at the top during peacetime. All right, obviously during war, the expenses are very high. So the new technology, 5% of GDP, all right, throughout the 19th century and the 20th century, with variations, small variations, depends on many factors. So it's not that you see that the price goes beyond what is the standard level of the economy. Now, with respect to Israel, and it's not that it's not that the armies or militaries grew smaller during wartime. So during World War II, the armies were undergoing a process of mechanization, and still hundreds of divisions were employed by the Soviets and by the Germans, dozens by each of the Western powers, so about 60 British divisions, large numbers. Increasingly employing the mechanized weapon systems. By the end of the war, quite mechanized, especially on the West. As for the Israelis, so given the stark imbalance in terms of the population, that is, Israel today has 10 million people. The Arab countries have 20 times more people, not counting Iran. So it was decided shortly after the state was founded, that the only way to match this was two ways to match it. One is superiority in terms of quality, that is technology and other things, morale. And the other is relying on the reserves. That is, we hold a small number of conscripts, general conscription, but the numbers are relatively limited, which feed the much larger reserve formations. And after the fall of the Soviet Union, the Israeli-Egyptian and the Israeli-Jordanian peace treaties, the demise of the regime in Syria, it seemed for a while that we wouldn't need such a large reserve army. It's now clear that we need more or less the same size of army, as I said, about 5 to 6 divisions, or 6 to 7 divisions. which can be cheaply maintained by keeping them at home. Basically, that's the whole logic of the reserve system. And provided that they are equipped with first-rate. So there is a balance here between the two. But generally, I think that we still strike the right balance.
Okay, I think that it was the last question. So I would like to thank you, Professor, for this very nice meeting you, for this, let's say, the cycle of 2 lectures, what you did here. It's always a pleasure for us to host such distinguished guests, and I hope that we can cooperate each other in the future. I hope the professor find the right way to invite you again and again to our academia. I think that in October we will have the possibility, because the military faculty is organizing the multi-domain operation conference, international conference. So I hope to have you on this conference again. So, Professor, thank you very much for your perspective on war, on the, let's say, revolution in military affairs, and of course your point of view, how you see the war, especially from the Middle East, I would say. So thank you very much again, and please join me to thank Professor Gat. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.